How to create $110,000 in equity inside 12 months. Hey everyone, Aidan here with another iStrategic Weekly Insight. This time it's Friday, the 10th of July. Most investors would think that creating six figures of equity in a property would take years, and it often does. But while long-term investing is still the goal, with the right strategy in place, you can accelerate the process. So this week I thought what I would do is walk through an actual recent client project with you from start to finish. Rather than talking about theory, I thought it would be useful to show you exactly what was purchased, how we planned it, what it cost, how it performed, most importantly, why it worked. So initially, the project at a glance, the strategy was to purchase a vacant block of land in a regional Victorian market and construct a dual key investment. A dual key is simply two properties on one title where you get two lots of rent. My client had a very limited budget, and once we'd assessed the goals, needs, risk profile, and financial capability, they opted for a dual key build project in an affordable market. The timeline was that the contracts were signed in June 2026, construction was completed, and the properties rented out by June 2027. So about 12 months in total. The land purchase was $190,000. The construction was $450,000. That's in total, turnkey with absolutely everything included. The completion on value completion rather was $750,000. So we've created $110,000 of equity just by going through that process in the 12 months. Now, what about the rental performance? Dwelling one is a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom dwelling that's single level. It rents for $440 a week. Dwelling two is also 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom. It rents for $400 a week. So combined rental income, we're getting $840 a week. That is a 6.8% gross yield based on the cost. So we've created 110,000 in equity. Our return on equity in year one has been 68.75%. Now, what that is, that's based on the client putting in a 20% deposit plus the costs like stamp duty and legals and so forth. The return on that amount has been 68.75%. Not bad for 1 year. The project timeframe took 12 months. Now, that includes the contract period, financing, the pre-construction period, the construction period, titling, and the rental campaign. So the whole thing, not just the build. So at first glance, these numbers are impressive, but they didn't happen by chance. They were the result of selecting the right market, purchasing well, choosing an appropriate product, and executing a strategy that aligned with local demand. Why this strategy worked? Strategy worked because we combined all of those things: market selection, strong fundamentals, detailed pricing analysis of the area, timing, a collaborative builder relationship, which I'll talk more about, and a solid negotiation practice to create an all-round great outcome. So to begin with, finding the land was quite difficult. There weren't many blocks of land available within that price point. The block we found was a needle in a haystack. It was an infill corner block right in pretty much in the heart of town. It had been overlooked probably because it was so small. But I worked with the builder to create a design that would work, where they're getting two street frontages, and both 2-bedroom dwellings have their own street car access. That's always preferable. I really like a corner block for these kind of projects. I was able to negotiate $9,000 off the asking price with the agent, and I worked closely with the builder to make sure that their designs would work on the block before we proceeded. Also, during the due diligence process, I undertook a detailed comparative market analysis, or CMA, of the area, and identified that we were in a street and an area where quality homes were being built, and they were selling for well over the 700K mark. I could see that there would be a profit on completion if we did this right. We also assessed the rental market and identified that smaller, single level, 2-bedroom dwellings were in hot demand amongst renters in that area. So the reason building can work, if I can touch on this, is if it's done correctly, what you're doing is you're undertaking a small development. With development, if you assess the cost base and the end values correctly, there should be a development profit immediately on completion. So this is the main advantage of building versus buying something established. Because you are undertaking the risk and the time and the work associated with building, you have a chance at creating that immediate profit. But what about cash flow? The second part, which is super important, is once the asset is complete and we have stabilized rental income, okay, we want to make sure that the incomes are going to be enough to get very close to covering all the outgoings of the property, including the rates, including the interest rate on the loan. That's actually hard to do in today's high interest rate environment, which is one reason why dual keys are an attractive proposition, because you get two rental incomes for basically the price of one house. So based on initial market analysis, I assessed that the rental would be somewhere between 800 and 840 a week on completion. And that's what we achieved on completion. We were able to achieve 840 a week. So the higher end of that range, that's the 6.8% gross yield. That's a good outcome in today's market. Now, here's a warning. The truth is that many, I'll say most, dual keys fail to meet this standard of outcome. I assess and review potential dual keys around the country every week for my clients, and I find that most of them fail to meet that benchmark for one reason or another. So usually either the market fundamentals of the area are weak, or the overall price is too high, or the rental assumptions are just not realistic. It's so important that thorough research is undertaken beforehand to avoid getting into a dud deal. I can't stress that enough. So the risks and consideration. In addition, I always recommend having built-in buffers in all assumptions to deal with the risks when undertaking a build. Here's what I do personally. Here's what I do for what I recommend for my clients that they have in place. Firstly, don't borrow to the absolute top of your borrowing capacity. Where possible, leave some headroom. Second, have some spare cash or funds available in case of cost overruns. Next, have timeline buffers in place to handle time delays, which are common, super common in building to have time delays. Next, always be conservative when assessing the potential rents at the outset. Now, I would prefer a pleasant surprise on completion rather than a nasty surprise of lower rents than you expect. Next is back your numbers up with multiple appraisals of the end values and the rents. This way you can be really confident with your pricing assumptions, that you're not just seeing things through a particular lens, but you're getting your assumptions cross-checked by other professionals. So that's the build. What about the experience? Here I'm referring to my client's overall experience throughout the project. Was working with iStrategic a better experience than managing the process on their own? I believe my clients would give a resounding yes to that question. The amount of research, due diligence, heavy lifting required to de-risk a project like this and deliver a successful outcome would feel like a full-time job. My clients would agree they could not have achieved this result by going it alone. So to me, as the owner of iStrategic, a high level of client satisfaction is right at the top of the list in terms of what we want to achieve as a company. I don't just want to churn out deals and treat people like a number. I genuinely go for the best client experience on every project. That's written into the company vision, and that's something I'm always striving for, and I'm really proud of because most of my clients could attest to that. All right, key takeaways. I hope you enjoyed this case study about a real and current deal, which demonstrates the process and the principles underpinning what we do at iStrategic and how it directly benefited these clients and each of my clients. This case study wasn't about chasing short-term gains. It was about applying well-researched strategy that combined equity creation with strong rental performance on completion. Now, while every investment is different and future outcomes can never be guaranteed, this project demonstrates the value of careful market selection, disciplined planning, and buying the right asset from the outset. Now, if you'd like to see more case studies like this, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share my other client projects with you and share my research. But that's it from me this week. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I hope that's been helpful, and have a great week.